A freight car rolls forward on iron rails. The weight it carries looks ordinary. The cost it generates is already decades in the making. Rail administrators set a pricing formula. It ties every freight rate to a fixed calculation. That calculation cannot move once it is locked. The post-war economy is expanding rapidly. New industries need reliable transport. Fixed pricing feels like a guarantee, not a constraint. Competitors use trucks. Trucks can adjust their rates freely. The rail network cannot respond without reopening the formula. The formula was designed under one condition. Costs were rising. The formula assumed they would stabilize. They did not. Infrastructure maintenance costs grow each year. Track, bridges, and switching yards require constant investment. Revenue stays fixed by the locked formula. Rail administrators recognize the gap. But reopening the formula requires regulatory approval. Regulatory approval takes years, not months. Time passes without correction. Each season the cost gap widens slightly. No single year looks like a crisis, but the total accumulates. A new cost category emerges. Steel prices rise significantly across the supply chain. The formula has no mechanism to absorb this input. The network keeps running. Operations continue normally from the outside, but the internal financial cushion is thinning with each passing month. Regulators were not absent. They were following their own rules. Those rules required evidence of harm before allowing rate changes. Evidence accumulates slowly in physical systems. Track degradation is visible only after years of underinvestment. By then, costs have already compounded. A key maintenance cycle gets deferred. The decision looks minor in isolation. It removes one layer of protection from the system. Each deferral is rational locally. The budget is constrained and the track still operates. No single deferral triggers visible consequences immediately. Freight volumes grow through the decade. More weight moves across the same infrastructure. The physical load on aging track increases steadily. The revenue gap and the cost gap are now both growing. They move in opposite directions. The space between them is the system's hidden liability. Network planners consider abandoning low-traffic lines. Abandonment requires regulatory approval, too. The system offers no easy exit from its own commitments. Low-traffic lines still require full maintenance. They carry few cars, but consume the same fixed operational overhead. The cost per unit carried rises quietly. A coalition of industrial users pushes back on any rate increase proposal. Their input costs depend directly on fixed freight rates. They become an active constraint on reform. The rail network and its users are now coupled tightly. Neither side can change independently. Each depends on the other's stability to function. Future videos on this channel examine how similar coupling effects shaped other large-scale economic outcomes. Subscribing ensures those analyses remain available as they are released. A new decade arrives. Trucking networks expand with government-funded highway construction. Rail's modal share begins to shift downward for the first time. As volume declines on some routes, fixed overhead stays constant. The cost per remaining unit of freight rises further. The formula absorbs none of this adjustment. Network administrators begin internal reviews. Their analysis confirms the gap. But confirmation does not create a mechanism for correction. The regulatory review process is itself a cost. Filing, waiting, and defending rate proposals consumes administrative resources. Small networks cannot sustain this cycle repeatedly. Several smaller rail operators reach their financial limit. They cannot service obligations while covering rising maintenance. They begin the formal insolvency process. Insolvency does not remove the infrastructure. The track still exists and must still be maintained. The cost transfers to whoever absorbs the failed operator. Governments face a choice between funding the gap or allowing service collapse. Both options carry significant costs. Neither option was priced into the original formula. Emergency public funding enters the system. It stabilizes operations in the short term, but it does not change the underlying pricing structure that created the gap. A reform proposal finally enters the regulatory process. It seeks to decouple rates from the original formula. The proposal is the first structural attempt in over 2 decades. Reform moves slowly because affected parties contest every stage. Each contesting party has a legitimate interest in the current structure. The process takes years to reach resolution. While the process continues, physical degradation does not pause. Track conditions worsen in regions where investment has been deferred longest. Operating speed limits are imposed for safety. Speed limits reduce capacity on critical corridors. Reduced capacity means fewer deliveries per day. Customers reroute to truck carriers who have no speed constraint. As volume falls further, the cost per unit rises further. This dynamic reinforces itself. Lower volume means higher unit cost, which drives volume lower still. The reform legislation eventually passes. It allows rate flexibility going forward. But decades of deferred maintenance cannot be recovered by a pricing change alone. The backlog of deferred maintenance is now a structural liability. It requires sustained capital investment over many years to address. New rate flexibility cannot fund it quickly. Public funding allocations are directed to the most critical failure points. Prioritization is required because resources are insufficient to address everything at once. Consolidation of rail operators reduces network redundancy. Fewer operators mean fewer competing routes. Resilience of the overall system decreases as efficiency increases. The original formula is gone, but the infrastructure it underfunded remains. It now operates under new rules carrying the physical consequences of the old ones. The total public and private cost of the pricing gap exceeds early estimates by a wide margin. The difference was not caused by error in any single year. It was caused by continuity across many years. The decision was made by people operating inside real constraints. Information was incomplete. Competitive pressure was genuine. The formula seemed like a reasonable stabilizer at the time. Systems do not require bad decisions to produce large costs. They require only that a constraint persist long enough for conditions to change around it. Time is the multiplier. The mechanism examined here is not unique to rail. Fixed rules in dynamic environments accumulate cost wherever they persist. The pattern repeats across industries and across decades. Today, the network still moves freight across the same corridors. The infrastructure carries the weight it always has. The cost of its past is built into every rate it charges now. The system carries its history forward without announcement. Each freight car crossing each bridge carries more than its load. It carries the compound weight of a formula that could not move.